Hello friends, the last topic in Rocket Revision batch is foreign trade policy. So we have completed all the areas. Now in this foreign trade policy, so this actually speaking for May 21 exam, this foreign trade policy should have been changed. But thank God it did not change. It is the same old story, but of course like some minor changes related to MEIS, that too not applicable for your May 21 exam. So therefore this foreign trade policy is scheduled to be ending by March 2020. So what is this foreign trade policy about? When international trade importance has increased, so Customs Department or Customs Act could not incorporate the regulation of foreign trade, that is encouraging exports and restricting imports. So when you see regulating the foreign trade means two things: encouraging exports and discouraging or restricting imports. These are the two aspects related to foreign trade. Okay, that is regulating foreign trade. And this job, when it is given to the Customs Department, they said it is a conflict of interest because on import there is customs duty, on export there is no customs duty. So why should we encourage exports and discourage imports? Because if we discourage imports, our revenue will affect. When we encourage exports, we will not get any revenue. So why should we do? This is a conflict of interest. Due to that reason, this job of regulating the foreign trade is entrusted to Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Accordingly, Foreign Trade Regulation and Development Act 1992 is enacted. So Foreign Trade Regulation and Development Act 1992 will empower Ministry of Commerce and Industry to regulate the foreign trade. Accordingly, what ministry did? Ministry of Commerce and Industry, so they have appointed an authority called as DGFT, Directorate General of Foreign Trade. That Directorate General of Foreign Trade, through their regional authorities appointed at the regions, various regions in India, so they will be implementing these policies related to regulating the foreign trade. And they come out with a plan for encouraging exports and restricting imports. That plan is known as foreign trade policy. Foreign trade policy. That plan, a 5-year plan, is known as foreign trade policy. What is the current 5-year plan? So 2015 to 20 is the current 5-year plan. Thereafter, from April 2021, that is April 2020. So because by March 2020 it is over. 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20 it should have been over. So from April 2020 a new foreign trade policy should have come. But because of the pandemic, what they did, they extended it further up to 31st March 2021. And again in March 2021, again the pandemic came. So because of which they extended it further up to September 2021. So till September 2021, the same old foreign trade policy will be continuing. There is no new foreign trade policy. Mainly foreign trade policy is what? Set of guidelines or instructions issued by central government. Which central government? Ministry of Commerce and Industry, in matters relating to import and export. So what is the basic difference between FTP and customs? FTP regulates developments and promotes international trade. But what is the procedure for import? What is the procedure for export? Valuation, collection of customs duty will be done by the Customs Act. Okay. And the provisions of FTP, does it have a legal backing? Yes. Foreign Trade Regulation and Development Act 1992. And who will formulate this FTP? DGFT, and it will be delegated to the regional authorities for implementation. So it's a 5-year policy plus annual updation, and current FTP is 2015 to 2021. Okay, and it is extended up to 39 2021. Done. Then what are the contents of foreign trade policy? Basic policy plus export incentives. That is only there in syllabus. But the handbook of procedures, ayat niryat forms, standard input output norms, harmonized system of coding, that is not there. Okay, handbook of procedures contains the procedures, normal. What are the various procedures for claiming the export incentives is there in the handbook of procedures. Then basic policy plus export incentives. Export incentives, because of exporting, lot of incentives will be given. Lot of incentives will be given to the exporter, and these incentives like MEIS, SCIS, advance authorization, duty-free import authorization, the discussion will make. Basic policy means like what is a policy for importation of second-hand goods, what is the policy for importation of gifts, exportation of gifts, that is the basic policy. Handbook of procedures, if I want to claim an export incentive, what is the procedure for that? Like that is given in the procedures. And forms, few certifications are required, so that forms, ayat niryat forms. Then standard input output norms, that is for every unit of output, what is the input that is required. Then harmonized system of nomenclature coding, that is what they will do in FTP with respect to every product under HSN. What is the policy that will be given? Like one particular product, whether it is prohibited or restricted, etc., that will be given. That is harmonized system of coding. Now we are discussing that under FTP imports are classified into basically 4. Prohibited, you cannot bring it at all. Restricted, you can bring but with a license, that is known as authorization. And number 3, that is reserved for STE, state trading enterprises. So there are some state trading enterprises who can only import specific goods. For example, petroleum products can be imported only by IOC or ONGC, and food products can be imported only by Food Corporation of India, like that. That is reserved for STE. And last one, freely importable. Freely importable does not mean that no need to pay customs duty. We need to pay customs duty, but we don't need any license or authorization. That is known as freely importable. Same way, exports are classified into 3: prohibited and restricted and freely exportable. Restricted means that authorization is required. So what is authorization? A license which will be obtained from the DGFT. So DGFT through its regional authorities will be giving a license, and that license is known as authorization. License to import or license to export is known as authorization, but it is not required with respect to all goods. It is required only with respect to the restricted goods, either under import or under export. How do we know? Check the foreign trade policy website, that is DGFT website, dgft.gov.in. Enter the product whichever you are importing or exporting, and next to that you will be seeing restricted, which means that so you can import it or export it only with a proper license. Okay, then this authorization which is granted is not a right. Suppose if usually this authorization will have a validity period. Within that period, that much quantity should be imported. Suppose if you want to extend, like even after that expiry of the period, validity period of that license, you want to import and you are going for renewal, at that time the DGFT is having power to not renew. So it is up to there, that the discretion is up to them. Same way, you are making an application for the license and they may not grant. So you cannot say that you have to grant, it is my right, like that. Authorization is not a right. So DGFT may refuse to grant or renew the license, that is authorization. Restricted goods imported are subject to actual user condition. Restricted goods means what? Those goods which requires authorization subject to actual user condition, which means that the one who imports it should only use it. He cannot sell it to any other person. So what will happen? Suppose if I need the goods but I could not get the authorization, I'll ask some other person who is having authorization to import and then give it to me. So but that is not possible, because it will be coming with a condition called as actual user condition. Unless otherwise it is dispensed with. Unless otherwise DGFT says okay, actual user condition is not there. Majorly actual user condition will be there. So these are all important for some short note questions. Then import export code. Short note questions or MCQs or comment based questions, this will be useful here. Okay. Import export code. So every person who wanted to import or export, and mainly to claim the incentives on in case of export, should be getting a IAC, import export code. This import export code will be given by DGFT, nothing but our permanent account number. So previously they used to give a different number, but now our permanent account number itself will be called as IEC. So then, sir, what is the need of obtaining it separately? No, you have to make an application and they will be authorizing your permanent account number for the purpose of IEC. So you need to quote that in all the documents related to communication with DGFT, even in the bill of entry at the time of import and export in case of shipping bill. Okay. Then provisions related to import and export of goods. I told you now the basic policy. So that basic policy only we are going to discuss. So there are two parts in FTP for your exam, basic policy, and the type of questions on basic policy will be mostly like MCQs or comment based questions or short note questions like that. Whereas on export incentives, they will be giving some practical questions. Now, we are going to discuss basic policy, import of second hand goods. You are importing second hand goods. What is the policy related to that? Now, whatever the policy for the new goods will not be applicable for second hand goods, because for second hand goods, a separate policy is mentioned. Okay. Now, what does it says? First, we need to check whether it is capital goods or other goods. What are capital goods? Basically, capital goods means plants, equipment, then appliances, all these will be coming under capital goods, machineries, etc. So, if it is capital goods, then again check whether it is 5 capital goods. What are they? Computers, laptops, air conditioners, diesel generator sets, and photocopiers. Okay, so these are the 5 capital goods. If you are importing it as second hand, even though its new version may not require authorization, but when you are importing it second hand, definitely requires authorization. For example, laptops and all, when we are importing new, we don't need any authorization. But when you are importing second hand laptop or used laptop, so definitely that requires authorization. Understood or not? So that is that point. Okay. And what are the 5 goods? That is laptops, computers, diesel generator sets, air conditioners, and photocopiers. Because these will be emitting lot of CFCs. Due to that reason, and it is harmful to the environment, they have brought this as a condition. What about the other capital goods? Other capital goods do not require any authorization if it is imported in second hand, like some machineries or appliances, etc. Whereas any other goods other than capital goods definitely requires authorization, like normal goods other than capital goods, like which are used for the purpose of business or for the purpose of manufacture, etc. Other than capital goods definitely requires authorization. Okay. Then next one, number 2, waste and scrap. Waste and scrap including metallic waste, which is usually restricted and requires authorization. See, in the name of waste and scrap, some hazardous goods may enter into India, like electronic waste, medical waste, and all may enter into India. That's why always waste and scrap will be restricted. No doubt, always waste and scrap will be restricted, including the metallic waste. Okay, and requires authorization. Now here it has one impact. Generally, whenever the goods are cleared from SEZ to DTA, it is treated as deemed import under SEZ Act. Whenever goods are cleared from SEZ to DTA, it is treated as deemed import under SEZ Act. So now, whenever it is deemed import, customs duty is payable by a person in DTA. Yes, it is there as per SEZ Act 2005. So, a person in DTA is required to pay customs duty. Now, there is some waste or scrap that is generated in the manufacturing activities in SEZ, which is cleared to DTA. Whether that also requires an authorization, because generally any import of waste and scrap requires authorization. But no, because it is coming from SEZ to DTA, even though it is deemed import, but that do not require any authorization, just customs duty, if it is paid, that is enough. Not only for waste and scrap, for every goods which are coming from SEZ to DTA, customs duty we need to pay, because it is deemed import. And generally import of waste and scrap requires authorization, but here it is deemed import from SEZ to DTA. That's why they are telling authorization not required. Okay, that is that point. Then import of goods, including capital goods, used in the projects abroad. This third point is an exception to first point. Generally, if you import any goods, that requires authorization, correct? But if you import any goods other than capital goods or specified capital goods, it requires authorization. But if it is used in project abroad for a period of 1 year, then you can bring it without an authorization. Okay, you understood or not? So therefore, whenever you get a question, say for example, you get a question that a person is importing laptops and second-hand laptops, and according to him, he is of the opinion that it does not require any authorization. What is your answer? So you need to tell laptops are capital goods and it's second hand. Whenever second hand laptops are imported, it requires authorization. However, if the laptops are used in the project abroad for a period of 1 year, it does not require authorization. So that catch, that line you need to write in the exam. Okay. Then next, import or export of gifts. So import of gifts. Generally, gift contains a product. Gift contains a product that is restricted. Now, in that case, whether any authorization required? No, because we don't know which product is coming as gift. So we are getting a gift, but that contains a restricted product. How department, customs department will know? Because on the top of that gift, they need to give a declaration. What product is there inside that pack? So they need to give a declaration. So they are giving a declaration that it contains a wristwatch. Watches is restricted. Generally, watches is restricted because in the name of watches, so diamonds and gold will be imported. Due to that reason, watches are restricted. Now, when watch is coming as a gift, we don't know that it contains a product which is restricted. In that case, we need to go for customs clearance permit. So authorization not required because we don't know which product we are importing before import. So therefore, it reaches the customs department. And if you want to clear it, you need to produce a customs clearance permit. Once you produce the customs clearance permit, it will be cleared. Okay, that is about import of goods which contain restricted goods. Suppose if import of gifts and gift contains a product which is not restricted, then that customs clearance permit is not required. So wherever authorization is required, in that place they are telling customs clearance permit. And recently, one of my student has asked me this doubt, that is, oxygen concentrators has been sent by his sister abroad as a gift to his father. His father is having COVID and the breathing issue is there. So vitals are so dangerous. So due to that reason, oxygen concentrator is being sent by his sister from abroad as a gift. It is not purchased. And customs department said, we will not give because generally oxygen concentrators are restricted goods. So we will not release this. So you get us the authorization, then we will release. You know, how much ever he may be CA final, but certain times they will forget this basic point. So when he asked me that, sir, they are asking for some documents, sir, but I don't know anything. So what is it I need to do? Simple, a customs clearance permit needs to be furnished. So that customs clearance permit, so there is a form which they need to download and they need to mention that it is for personal purpose. It is not for any commercial purpose. And once they give the declaration, their address, etc., they need to attach their identity proof. And when it is submitted in the customs, so online itself it can be submitted. So once it is submitted, so then the goods will be released. Or it can be handed over to the courier agency or the post which is bringing. So usually that is sent by the courier agencies or any post. So therefore, once we hand over the documents to them, so they will take care. Courier agencies will take care. So that is about the customs clearance permit. Then in case of export of gifts, if it is restricted, we know now which product we are exporting. So if it is restricted product, definitely you need to get an authorization. If it is other than restricted product, then value in a year does not exceed 5 lakhs. Value in a year does not exceed 5 lakhs. That is other than restricted goods, you are exporting as gifts. Means you will not get any consideration. But the value does not exceed 5 lakhs. It's okay in a year. If the value exceeds 5 lakhs, why value exceeding 5 lakhs in a year you are sending as gifts? Because you are sending as gift means you will not bring any consideration to India. Why are you sending it? So therefore they are asking us to get an authorization, even though they are unrestricted goods. They are not restricted goods. But then also authorization is required, mainly because these are sent as gifts and that will not be having any consideration for that reason. That is this, okay? Then import of samples. What is this? See, generally in order to place a commercial quantity as an order, so first we will import these samples, we will check how the product is, and then only we will place an order in commercial quantity, because if we place the order in the commercial quantity, we end up paying some advance, and if the quantity is not up to the mark, that if the quality of the goods is not up to the mark for that large quantity, so we have to either relinquish the title or we need to clear and again export it back. Unnecessary freight and other costs are involved. Due to that reason, we will first import the samples and check the product quality and then place the order. So these samples, suppose if it is vegetable seeds, bees and new drugs. Vegetable seeds, bees for honeybee farming. and any drugs, new drugs, definitely authorization is required because we don't know what kind of goods they are. It may be hazardous, due to that reason authorization required. Then tea. So tea is brought as samples. So when tea is brought as samples, up to 2000 rupees, CF value up to 2000 rupees, authorization not required. Otherwise, if the CF value exceeds 2000 rupees, then authorization is required in case of tea. Whereas, if there is any samples up to 3 lakh rupees can be imported by all exporters. For exporters, they are giving a benefit. What is that? If there is an exporter, that exporter can import the samples up to 3 lakh rupees, samples up to 3 lakh rupees without payment of customs duty. That is the benefit which is given. Okay, this is the 3 points in relation to import of samples. Then export of samples, only 2 points. If it is freely exportable goods, no restriction, send. If those goods are non-restricted goods, other than restricted goods, no need to have any restriction, send it. If it is restricted goods, then we need to make an application to DGFT and then only it can be sent. Not that it requires an authorization because it is just a sample. So, but we need to make an application to DGFT and even it can be exported as a part of passenger baggage also. Then, re-importation of goods repaired abroad can be without any authorization. For example, first we are importing a car. When we are importing a car, that requires an authorization. So we got an authorization license to import and we imported it. We sent it abroad for repairs and the repairs are carried out. Again, it is coming back. Generally, cars require authorization, but these are imported cars sent abroad for repairs and then again it is coming. So that do not require any authorization. That is point number 7. Then point number 8, import of capital goods under lease financing. So lease financing, what will happen? You will pay the lease rentals rather than pay the consideration for that asset and again the asset will be going back. In that case, as lot of foreign exchange proceeds are sent out due to that reason, so RBI will intervene and will ask as to why you are taking it on lease rather than purchasing it. So, import of capital goods under lease financing, permission of regional authority not required, but permission from RBI is required. Okay. Then, I have already imported the goods. Generally, there are some goods which requires authorization. I have already imported that goods and it is there in the customs, but I did not obtain authorization. Now, without filing authorization, the goods will not be cleared. Can I get an authorization later after import also? Yes. So keep the goods and either that goods will be kept in a warehouse or that goods will be kept under the control of a custodian. We will go to the DGFT, get the authorization, submit the authorization and then we can get the goods. Okay. So that is that. Point number 9. Goods already imported without authorization can be cleared against an authorization issued subsequently. But if those goods are reserved for STE, they only should import. You cannot import. So they only should import. In that case, this is not possible. Then execution of bank guarantee, letter of undertaking or bond with customs authority for import without customs duty and with regional authority for local purchases. So there is something called as advance authorization. What is that advance authorization? It is one of the export incentive which says that if you are exporting goods, you can import the material without payment of customs duty and you can procure the material locally without payment of GST because you are using it in export. Okay, that is known as advance authorization. If you want to import without payment of customs duty, you need to execute a bond and that will be with customs authorities. Bond will be executed. Suppose if you want to make a local purchases without payment of GST because for the supplier it is deemed export, then in that case it should be the bond or bank guarantee or LUT will be furnished with regional authorities. Then next point number 11, warranty spares. Warranty spares other than restricted may be exported along with main equipment or subsequently, but within the contracted warranty period subject to approval of RBI. What is that? So warranty spares means, say we exported the main product. For example, a car is exported and which is covered under the warranty. Now, a particular part is damaged, we need to replace a part. So that part we are sending under warranty without any consideration. We will not get any consideration. In that case, can we send and does it require any authorization? We can send provided it is within the contracted warranty period subject to approval by RBI. So why RBI comes into picture here? Because that will not get any consideration for that reason. Then last point, in case of third party exports. What is a third party exports? Third party exports means I am a manufacturer, I am not exporting. I am exporting through a person who is having the license and who is having good contacts abroad, so called as a merchant exporter. When a manufacturer exporter is exporting through a merchant exporter, or a supporting manufacturer is exporting through a merchant exporter, then in that case, the details of the manufacturer as well as the merchant exporter should be mentioned in the shipping bill. Please see that. In case of third party exports, very important point here, shipping bill should indicate the name of manufacturer and third party exporter. The one who manufactured goods and the one who exported goods. Both people names should be mentioned in the shipping bill. Only then the manufacturer will enjoy the benefits, because manufacturer will be importing the raw material. For importing the raw material, if any concessions are there, that can be enjoyed only if manufacturer name is mentioned in the shipping bill. Whereas in all other documents, so the name of the one who exports can be there. Even if manufacturer name is not there, it is okay. Okay. So this is about the basic policy under FTP. Now we are moving on to various export promotion schemes. We have various export promotion schemes. Okay, mainly advance authorization and duty free import authorization, which is a duty exemption scheme. Duty exemption means, first of all, we don't have to pay. That is duty exemption scheme. Duty remission scheme. Duty remission means what? First we will pay and then we will get it as a refund. What is that? Duty drawback. Okay, duty exemption is no need to pay customs duty on import. Duty remission is first pay and then get it as a refund. That is duty remission. Got it? Now, so duty remission already we discussed, that is duty drawback. Now it is duty exemption. Under the duty exemption we have two, that is advance authorization and duty free import authorization. This is with respect to raw material. Import of goods other than capital goods without payment of customs duty, that is AA and DFIA. That is one. Then EPCG is there. EPCG is for importing capital goods without payment of customs duty. So these are the three policies what we have, or three incentives what we have with respect to import of goods without payment of customs duty, that is duty exemption schemes. Number one, advance authorization. Number two, duty free import authorization. Number three, EPCG. And what is that? In these three cases, not only we can import without payment of customs duty, we can also locally procure without payment of GST, because for the supplier, it will be treated as deemed export. Correct? So supplier has two options. He may not recover the GST at all from the recipient. So therefore, that is what I am telling. So they can either import without payment of customs duty, or they can locally procure without payment of GST. Now, what is the difference between AA and DFIA? Both are concerned with material, that is raw material only. So what is the basic differences that we need to understand? Advance authorization, transferability. Advance authorization, license cannot be transferred. You cannot transfer the license to any other person, but DFIA can be transferred once the export obligation is completed. What is the export obligation? The export obligation under AA, if it is T, 50% value addition. If it is other goods, 15% value addition. So what does it mean? My FOB value of export should be at least 15% more than the AF value of import. So that is the meaning of export obligation. So when you calculate the export obligation, so that should be seen. When you calculate export obligation, that should be seen between two things. Okay, remember this. So export obligation under AA and DFIA. Export obligation under AA and DFIA can be seen by comparison with two things. So we need to compare between CIF value of import, because in case of import we need to take CIF value. So CIF value of import and FOB value of export. So there will be a question wherein they will say that CIF value of import is 1 lakh. CIF value of import is 1 lakh. FOB value of export is 1,10,000. Whether export obligation achieved. Whether export obligation achieved in case of DFIA. What is your answer? First we need to know what is the value addition in case of DFIA. The value addition is 20%. Means what should be the FOB value of export? The FOB value of export should be how much? The FOB value of export should be 1,20,000. Why? What should be the minimum value addition? 1 lakh plus 20%. So that is 1,20,000 should be the export value. But what is the export value? 1,10,000. So export obligation not achieved. When export obligation is not achieved, what will happen? So whatever benefit that we got will be recovered along with interest. Export obligation not achieved. So benefit availed. What is the benefit availed here? What is the benefit availed? Generally we don't have to pay any customs duty. That is the benefit availed. So benefit availed shall be paid along with interest. So that is the disadvantage with respect to not achieving the export obligation. You understood? Like that it will be given. So what will be the export obligation? Export obligation is how much value addition we need to make on the imports. If it is AA, we have two percentages, 15 and 50. If it is T, then 50% value addition. If it is any other goods, 15. If it is DFIA, 20% value addition we need to make. What is the period within which that export obligation needs to be fulfilled? 18 months from the date of issuance of authorization if it is AA. If it is DFIA, 12 months. Okay. So in case of AA, we have 1.5 years, but whereas in case of DFIA, we have only 1 year. Then applicability to gem and jewelry sector. Advance authorization is applicable for gem and jewelry sector, but DFIA not applicable. Okay. Now, you know what? The basic point between AA and DFIA is that in case of AA, all customs duties are exempted, but in case of DFIA, only basic customs duty is exempted. So compared to DFIA, AA is only best. Okay, because in case of AA, but only that disadvantage with respect to AA is that the license cannot be transferred to any other person even after completion of export obligation. But see the advantages. The minimum value addition condition is only 15% and all customs duties are exempted, whereas under DFIA only basic customs duty is exempted. Then fixation of standard input output norms. For advance authorization not required, but for DFIA yes, standard input output norm should be fixed for that person, like for that industry, then only they can get DFIA. Okay, what is standard input output norms? That is for every unit of output, how much of inputs can be purchased. That is known as standard input output norms. Then when is it available? So that is AA and DFIA. It shall be issued on pre-export basis or post-export basis with an entitlement. Pre-export or post-export basis. Pre-export or post-export basis with an entitlement. What does it mean? Before export itself, you can import the raw material without payment of custom duty. That is pre-export. Post-export is you first export it using the local like whatever raw material that is there in the stock, you export it using the raw material in the stock, and you replace the raw material in the stock by importing without payment of customs duty. But in that case, we need to get a chartered accountant certificate. Remember, only chartered accountant certificate to prove that how much of this stock, existing stock, is used in exported goods. To that extent we can import. Say for example, we are exporting some goods that requires 100 kgs of a particular raw material. So 100 kgs of a raw material we used in export. Now we can import without payment of customs duty using advance authorization, but provided it is after export, already export is made. Now we need to get a certificate from a chartered accountant stating that this 100 kgs of raw material in stock is used in the exported goods. So to that extent of 100 kg we can import without payment of customs duty. That is post-export basis. So AA is either pre-export or post-export basis, whereas DFIA is always post-export basis. First export, use a material, first export, and then that material can be replaced by importing without payment of basic customs duty. That is DFIA. So this is the difference between AA and DFIA. So now this can be asked for theory as well as for practical questions. And value addition, already we know how to do the value addition, but some points are there. Remember, for value addition, if free of cost material is supplied, okay, then in that case, that is, we are importing some material. So foreign buyer, foreign buyer is supplying some material to us free of cost. Then in that case, that will be used in export. So that free of cost material supplied by the foreign buyer, the notional value of that free of cost material should be added in CAF value as well as in the FOB value. While doing the value addition, don't ignore it. Whatever is the free of cost material supplied by the foreign buyer, you ascertain what is the notional value and include it in the imports, CAF value of imports, as well as include it in the FOB value of exports, and then do the computation related to value addition. That is this. Okay, that is one point. Another point is, if any goods are imported on which we claimed duty drawback, even that should also be included into computation of value addition. See that. So any other imported materials on which benefit of duty drawback is claimed or intended to be claimed should also be included in the value addition, which means while calculating the CAF value of imports, you include that duty drawback imports also. These are the 2 points which you need to remember for computation of value addition. Then we completed AA and DFIA. Now we are moving on to the next one, EPCG scheme, Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme. Under this Export Promotion Capital Goods Scheme, so we can import the capital goods without payment of customs duty, and we have an export obligation. Sir, what is, even IGST not required to be paid? Yes. Total customs duty not required to be paid. But what is the export obligation? So this scheme is about importing capital goods for use in the exported goods without payment of any customs duty. Even local procurement can be made, already discussed. So these capital goods can be imported for pre-production, production or post-production activities. And there is an export obligation. We need to make some exports. How much? There are 2 points, specific export obligation and average export obligation. What is the specific export obligation? How much ever is the duty saved? For example, we imported capital goods worth rupees 100 crores. 100 crores into say 30% on an average. So 30 crores is the duty saved. Now whatever is the duty saved multiplied with 6. So 30 into 6, 180 crores you need to make exports. But 180 crores of export we cannot make just like that. So there is a time frame for that, 6 years. So 6 times the duty saved we need to achieve over a period of 6 years. But we have in that 2 aspects. That is, first block of 4 years, 1 to 4 years, we have to achieve 50%, means 90 crores. And in remaining 2 years, that is 4th and 6th year, we need to achieve the remaining amount. Suppose in the first block we achieved 100, we need to achieve 80 in the second block, like that. Okay. So 180 crores we need to achieve, because how much is the duty saved? 30. So 30 into 6. So 180 crores should be the export obligation. This is specific export obligation. Average export obligation is like, so for every year your export should be greater than or equals to the average of the 3 preceding licensing years. They use the word licensing years, means 6 years. 6 years. Sir, how to calculate this 6 years? From the date in which license is given to the next year end of that date. For example, if the license is given on 18th of July, so 18th of July 2019, 18th of July 2019 to 18th of July 2019 to 17th of July 2020, like that only 1 year should be calculated. 1 year, first year, second year, third year. This is the licensing years, not the financial year, not the calendar year. We need to take the licensing years. And for each licensing year, what is it they are telling? We take the average of the 3 preceding licensing years. So for first year, average is 0. For second year, you take the previous year as the average. For third year, you take the average of the 2 previous years. For fourth year, you take the average of the 3 previous years. Like that, you need to take 3 previous years average, and current year export should be at least that much. This is like you need to maintain the consistency. That is the meaning of average export obligation. Sir, both should be satisfied. Yes, both should be satisfied. What if we satisfied specific export obligation, but we did not satisfy average export obligation? Then export obligation discharge certificate will not be given. EODC. So once you export, once you complete the export obligation, they will give a export obligation discharge certificate, so that there won't be any recovery in future with respect to the benefits what we claim. Otherwise, whatever is the duty saved, that we need to pay along with the interest. Now, validity of the authorization. So once the authorization is given, it will have a validity of 18 months. Okay, means in 18 months we can make the import. We can make the import from the date of issue of authorization, and that is the validity of the authorization. Then other conditions. Import of capital goods shall be subject to actual user condition till export obligation is completed. After export obligation is completed, capital goods can be sold or transferred. Got it? Import of capital goods shall be subject to actual user condition till export obligation is completed. After export obligation is completed, capital goods can be sold or transferred. Got it? So this is like DFIA. In DFIA, it's like DFIA, not exactly like not exactly DFIA. So we have imported some capital goods. We used it. We completed the export obligation. Now that capital goods can be sold to any other person. Yes, you can sell. Second-hand capital goods are ineligible. So only first-hand goods can be, like new goods only can be imported. Both physical exports as well as deemed exports shall also be counted for fulfillment of export obligation. Then, suppose if the authorization holder has fulfilled 75% or more of specific export obligation and 100% of the average export obligation in half, that is 3 years. In 3 years, we achieved 75%. So what is it? 75%. 180 we need to achieve. So 180 into 75%, 135 crores we achieved in 3 years. Plus we maintain the consistency for 3 years. Then we don't have to achieve 25%. So export obligation discharge certificate will be given. That is this early fulfillment. That is this early fulfillment. It can be tested in exam. Then under this scheme, capital goods are imported on full payment of applicable duties in cash, and later basic customs duty paid on capital goods is remitted. Got it? So what will happen under this scheme? First we will import capital goods and we will pay, and thereafter we will get the remittance. Okay. So, but sir, you said it as duty exemption scheme. See, it was duty exemption scheme. It was duty exemption scheme with respect to capital goods. But now EPCG, what they make, it is like first you pay and then you will get the remittance. Then you will get the refund. But what you will get as refund? Only the basic customs duty paid on capital goods is remitted under this scheme. That is about EPCG. You understood? So previously, so it was duty exemption scheme, and now it has become duty remission. So first you need to pay customs duty and you will get refund of only the basic customs duty. Okay. Then indigenous sourcing of capital goods and benefit to domestic suppliers as deemed exports. So that already we discussed. That is, we can make the purchases locally, and so the domestic supplier who is making sale of capital goods, so for him it is treated like deemed export. Then MEIS versus SEIS, that is the next export incentive. merchandise export from India scheme and service export from India scheme. Merchandise export from India scheme means if you are exporting notified goods to notified countries, actually this MEIS scheme is getting abolished. This MEIS scheme is getting abolished, and in the place of this they are bringing RODTEP, that is rebate of duties and taxes on export of goods. So that will be coming, a new scheme will be coming, but for May 21 exam this MEIS is only applicable. So this merchandise export from India scheme, what is that? Notified goods exported to notified countries, we will be getting this benefit. Notified goods exported to notified countries. And who is the eligible person? Any person with valid IEC, import export code, even including EOU and SEZ is also eligible for this scheme. Okay, an EOU or SEZ is also eligible for this scheme. And then next, what is the benefit? Whatever is the FOB value mentioned in the shipping bill or FOB value realized, whichever is lower, whatever is the FOB value mentioned in the shipping bill or FOB value realized, whichever is lower, usually which is lower? So FOB value mentioned in the shipping bill only is lower, because when we realize the currency rate will increase, so we realize more money. But when realized value will be less, suppose if there is any bad debts, so whichever is lower, into 2% or 3% or 5%, we will get as an incentive. What we can do with that incentive? We will get a duty credit scrip. But in future, that money will go into electronic duty credit ledger. So right now it is duty credit scrip. But we have a section, so which deals with section 51B, that is electronic duty credit ledger. So in future, once the rules are notified in that regard, so what will happen? Rather than giving it as a script, that money will go into electronic duty credit ledger, which can be used for payment of customs duty on import. Okay, like that. So what right now what is happening? We'll get a duty credit like duty credit script. Using the duty credit script, we can pay for the customs duties, or we can pay for any licensing fee under FTP, or we can transfer the duty credit script to any other person. When we transfer the duty credit script to any other person, should we pay any GST? No, not required, because there is some benefit. So why we will transfer to some other person? Because that some other person will be paying customs duty, for that he can use the duty credit script. That is this. Frequency, see this duty credit script, whatever MEIS benefit is given with respect to each export. With respect to each export, they will be giving, like right now I exported. So in a month I exported 10 times, means 10 times we will get MEIS benefit. What is the procedure and the time limit? So we need to fill the details in form ANF 3A regarding what are the values of exports that we have made within 12 months from let export order. So whenever we get the let export order from the customs officer, from there within 12 months, or 3 months from the date on of which DGFT will upload the, like customs officer will upload the shipping bill in the DGFT server. See, generally when we file shipping bill, we will get let export order. But that shipping bill, customs officer should upload in DGFT server. So whenever he uploads, from the date 3 months or 12 months from let export order, whichever is later, is the maximum time limit by which we need to form ANF 3A. Then some special points in this regard. If you are exporting through courier, then the value will be restricted to 5 lakhs. If the value of exports through courier is somewhere 5,80,000, we will take only 5 lakhs. If the value of exports is 4,30,000, we will take only 4,30,000. Restricted to 5 lakhs. Then next, ineligible categories. Supplies from DTA to SEZ. DTA to SEZ, we will not get MEIS benefit, because DTA to SEZ is within the country only, na? Then export through transshipment in India. What is that? So goods are originating outside India, destination also outside India, just that transshipment takes place in India from one ship to another ship. So in that case also it will not be counted as your exports. Then deemed exports also ineligible. Then SCZ, EOU, EHTP, STP or BTP or FTZ products. So special economic zone, export oriented unit, electronic hardware technology park, biotechnology park or free trade zone in India manufactures some products. Those products are exported through DTA is also ineligible for MEIS benefit. Then exports which are subject to minimum export price. This is the price at which, minimum price at which it should be exported. Like that, if it is there, those kind of goods are also ineligible. Then exports by units in FTZ. So these are the ineligible categories. You need to remember this. Okay. So this is about MEIS. So I predict some question definitely for MEIS because this is the last attempt where a question can be asked on MEIS. So definitely it will undergo change for November 21 exam due to that reason. Then service export from India scheme. Those who are appearing for November 21 who are watching this particular rocket revision batch. So don't worry. I'll be again taking a rocket revision batch for November 21 exam with all the amendments. So first I will be making the amendments for November 21 exam. So there will be an amendment session and I am planning for a live session, live amendment session related to that. Okay. And that will be anyhow recorded and you can watch it anytime. So first an amendment session I am making, and second I am making this rocket revision batch for November 21 exam for sure. And in that, that also I am planning to have it as live. So that batch you can definitely attend if you are watching these lectures and if you are appearing for November 21. Don't worry, for every attempt I will be doing this. Okay, now say this. SCIS benefit. What is that SCIS? Service Export from India scheme. That is, there are some notified services. Those notified services are exported to any country. Those notified services are exported to any country. Then it is known as SCIS. And the service provider must be located in India. And it must have an active IEC at the time of rendering such services. So the service provider should be located in India and that service provider should have an active import-export code at the time of rendering of such services. So first, service provider in India, they should have an IEC, but that IEC condition will not be satisfied because usually service providers will not have a IEC. They will not be much focusing on IEC because they are engaged in export of goods. Only those people who are engaged in export of goods will be focusing about IEC. But a service provider is engaged in export of services, so they will not be bothered about IEC. Okay. Then minimum NFE during the financial year, that is for the financial year for which you are claiming the benefit. If the person is an individual or sole proprietor, $10,000 should be the minimum NFE. And any other person, that is partnership firm or any other person, $15,000 should be the minimum NFE. First, service provider should be in India and they should have an active IEC and minimum net foreign exchange earnings. Individual or sole proprietorship, $10,000 in the year, and if it is any other, $15,000. What is the meaning of net foreign exchange earnings? Net foreign exchange earnings means income in forex minus expenditure in forex. And so here the benefit is claimed on a yearly basis. The frequency is not every time we export the service. So it is on a yearly basis. Whatever is our NFE for that year, on that 2% or like 3% to 5% will be given. So this percentages depends upon the services, but that will be given in the question in the exam. What is the notified percentage? You can take that notified percentage. And the frequency already we discussed, it is yearly, and procedure ANF 3B needs to be filed within 12 months from the end of the relevant financial year. So within 12 months from the end of the relevant financial year, ANF 3B needs to be filed. And some special points: supply of service from India to any other country or supply of service from India to service consumers of any other country. Means the recipient is not outside India, recipient is in India, but he do not belong to India, he belongs to outside India, like tourists who are coming to India. Even that service will also be counted for SCIS benefit, provided the consideration is received in foreign exchange. How we will receive it in foreign exchange? Through the international credit cards. Through international credit cards, we will be receiving the consideration in foreign currency. That will be counted for SCIS benefit. Ineligible sectors. Telecom sector is ineligible. Investments and capital receipts. Whatever is an investment or capital receipt, that is also ineligible. Foreign exchange turnover by healthcare institutions or educational institutions, like equity participation or donation. For a healthcare sector or a educational institution, some donations will be received or equity participation is received, that will not be considered as income in forex. Don't consider that. Foreign exchange earnings for services provided by airlines, shipping lines flying from a foreign country to another foreign country without touching India at all, even that will also not be counted. Any earnings is generated in India, that will also not be counted. Payment for services received from exchange earners foreign currency account. So these are the ineligible categories for SEIS benefit. Okay. Then the next area that we have is status holder under foreign trade policy. Who is a status holder? So status holder, there are actually total 5 status, 5-star status, 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star and 5 star. And usually exporters will get the star ratings when, if their export performance is $3 million, they will get a 1-star status. If their export performance is $25 million, they'll get 2 star. First $3 million, 3, 25, then 100, 500, 2000, 3, 25, 100, 500, 2000. So that much they need to achieve as an export performance, then they will be given a star status. But this export performance is for 1 year or more than a year. It is for more than a year. It is not for just 1 year. It is not for just 1 year. Please see. So the current year and the previous 3 years will be counted. So we need to take the FOB value of exports. We need to take the FOB value of exports for the current and the previous 3 years. So total 4 years data should be taken, and they need to achieve that much. They need to achieve that much in 2 out of 4 years. In 2 out of 4 years, they need to achieve that. Okay. They need to achieve that in 2 out of 4 years. So in a block of 4 years, 2 times they should achieve $3 million. So then only they will be counted for the purpose of achievement of the star status. Okay. So every year you need to take the exports, FOB value of exports, and how to calculate the export performance. The export performance is current year plus previous 3 years. That is the export performance we need to take. And in 2 out of 4 years, if they achieve $3 million, then 1-star status. Then in 2 out of 4 years, achieve $25 million. In that year when they achieve, so they will be given 2-star status like that. Then, what are the benefits to the status holders? Authorization and customs clearances on self-declaration basis. So they don't need any certificate from any person. So the self-declaration, they will get the authorization and customs clearances. Fixation of input-output norms on priority. That is, within 60 days, standard input-output norms will be fixed, because a person who is having standard input-output norms only can go for DFIA. Okay, for that reason. Exemption from furnishing of bank guarantee. That's the third advantage. Then, 2-star export house and above, that is except 1 star, can establish the warehouses. So they can have their own warehouses where imported goods can be kept without payment of customs duty, and only when it is used they need to pay customs duty, like that. Okay. Then green channel clearance for above 3 star. Above 3 star. Above 3 star means 4 star and 5 star will have a green channel clearance. Then next, self certification as to made in India. So they can certify, that exporter can certify. All status holders can export other than restricted items on free of cost basis for export promotion. Okay. So this is one point. Listen carefully. All status holders can export what? Other than restricted items on free of cost basis for export promotion, subject to 2% of the average annual export realization during the preceding 3 licensing years. So during the preceding 3 licensing years, whatever is the average exports, whatever is the average export realization, into 2%, they can export on free of cost basis for export promotion. For gem and jewelry sector, it is 1 crore or 2% of the average of current and previous year, whichever is lower. So this you need to remember here. Maybe a question can be framed on this. Already we discussed how to compute the export performance. Then the next one is export promotion zones scheme. What are the various export promotion zones? We have EOU, EHTP, STP and BTP. These are the export promotion zones. Whenever we refer to EOU, it also includes EHTP, STP and BTP. And what are the types of businesses that they can do in these places, in these zones? They can do all businesses, manufacturing, service, consulting, whatever it is they can do, except trading. Trading units are not allowed. Other than trading units are not allowed. And so in a period of 5 years, they need to achieve a positive NFE cumulatively. Means 5 years taken together, income in forex minus expense in forex should be positive. Okay, but if they are not able to achieve in 5 years, it will be extended for a further period of 1 year. What are the tax implications? We will see. So why we need to start our business in EOU, EHTP? Let's see the tax implications. If any goods are imported into that place, there is no customs duty on that goods. And if any services are imported, of course IGST is payable on import of service under RCM. That is this import. Then when they make local purchases, that local purchase is not exempt because sale to EOU is not exempted, but it will be treated as deemed exports. It will be treated as deemed exports, correct or not? So exports, whenever supplier is making sale to EOU, EHTP, STP or BTP, it is known as deemed exports. So in case of deemed exports, what will happen? Two options are available to the supplier. They may not recover GST from EOU, so EOU naturally can procure without payment of GST, or they can recover GST from EOU and EOU will take it as ITC and get refund of that ITC. Okay, so these are the two options. Then when EOU is making sale to a recipient in India, normal GST payable and that can be taken as ITC by the recipient. When they are exporting goods or services, that will be zero rated. Export of goods are exempted. EOU exporting goods is exempted, and under GST it will be zero rated. Export of goods and services. Got it? Now, whenever they export, whatever GST they paid, that they will get as a refund. Either a deemed export refund they will claim, or refund of unutilized ITC they will claim. Okay, so that is what I have given us two alternatives here. So these are the incentives available. That's why people will start business in EOU and they need to achieve a positive NFE for a period of 5 years. Otherwise, a 1 year extension will be granted. If there is a existing DTA, domestic tariff area, 1 unit is there. If they want to convert it into a EOU, then minimum of 50 crores investment in plant and machinery, or they should be having an export turnover of 50 crores. Either this or that. Investment more than 50 crores, investment of 50 crores and above, greater than or equals to 50 crores in plant and machinery, or turnover greater than or equals to 50 crores should be there. Then they can place their application with the board of approval, and the board of approval will convert the existing DTA unit, that is domestic tariff area unit, into an EOU, export oriented unit. Then who can establish EOU? Is there any investment criteria? That is, newly if I want to start, what should be the minimum investment criteria? 1 crore in plant and machinery, but it is only for EOU, not for EHTP, STP and BTP. And this 1 crore investment in plant and machinery also can be relaxed by board of approval. Then clearance to DTA. Entire production must be exported, but they are giving certain relaxations so that some quantity can be cleared to domestic tariff area. Then exit from EOU scheme. With the approval of Development Commissioner, EOU may opt out of the EOU scheme Such exit shall be subject to payment of applicable GST and compensation cess. If unit has not achieved any obligations, it shall also be liable to pay penalty at the time of exit. Okay, like whatever benefits they claim with respect to GST that they need to pay, even if they have not achieved the export obligation, that penalties under FTP shall be levied. Okay. Then the last area is deemed exports. Already we have some deemed exports under GST, and we know what are the incentives in that case. Two options just now we discussed. Whereas under FTP, what are the incentives? Sir, if I am making deemed exports, listen, concentrate. If I am making deemed exports, I will get two benefits. Either of the two benefits. Number one, I can import goods without payment of customs duty to make deemed exports. I can import goods without payment of customs duty to make deemed exports. That is AA, advance authorization, or deemed export duty drawback. That is, I will import goods, pay customs duty. When I make deemed export, whatever customs duty I paid on import, I will get as a duty drawback. So there are two benefits available in case of deemed export duty drawback. Number one, on import, whatever customs duty we paid, so we don't have to pay any customs duty. And point number two, whatever exports that we are making, on import we pay customs duty, and on export we will get refund of that, like duty drawback. Okay, these are the two benefits in case of deemed exports. So see that what are the benefits in case of deemed export? Advance authorization and deemed export duty drawback. Refund of basic customs duty on inputs used in manufacture of goods supplied. Now, what are considered as deemed exports? We have three deemed exports under GST. The same is given here also. Supply of goods against AA, advance authorization. So there is one exporter who is having AA. You are making sale to them. That is deemed export for you. You are supplying goods to a unit located in EOU, HTP, STP, BTP. And you are making supply of capital goods under against EPCG. There is a person who is holding EPCG, you are making sales to that person. That will also come under deemed exports. So this is also deemed exports under GST. It is also deemed exports. It is also deemed exports under GST. Okay. Then supply of goods to projects. So if there is any project which is financed by multilateral or bilateral agencies notified by Department of Economic Affairs under ICB. So remember, certain projects, that is international competitive bidding projects. International competitive bidding projects are nuclear power projects, are projects financed by UN or international organizations. Remember, international competitive bidding projects, nuclear power projects, are projects financed by UN or international organization. To such projects, if you are making any sale, for you it is deemed export. Okay, so that is this. So these are considered as the deemed exports, and these are the two incentives in that case. So with this, we completed the entire foreign trade policy, and the rocket revision batch is over. And the objective of this rocket revision batch is that before the day of exam, you will not be having that much time. So that's the reason why this rocket revision batch is made. So just one day before the exam, if you sit in the morning, by evening you can complete the entire revision related to indirect tax, and the pocket book you can keep as hand in hand, and you can go through the entire discussion, so that will be sufficient, and thereafter you can see the practical questions and you can go to the exam. So mainly for that purpose only this rocket revision batch is made. And so please forward this information to as many friends as you can, so that they will get benefited. And last time also many students, last time I started rocket revision batch, but what last time I did, I released it as one video, but many students gave me some suggestions like make it like part video, sir, for every concept one video, so that we will go and see that particular concept. Accordingly, I made like concept wise, and there will be one consolidated video also, put together everything. Okay, and so please share this as much as you can to your friends, and so that they will get benefited. And all the best for your exams. Whether exam will happen or not, I don't know, but definitely according to ICI, what they are telling is that exam will definitely happen in the month of July end or August. They want to conduct at any cost. So therefore, due to that reason, so prepare well for your exam and give the best shot. Thank you all. Take care.